Every contemporary novelist will tell you that the question he or she is most frequently asked is the autobiography question. How autobiographical is it? That's what Salman Rushdie mentions in his essay called Autobiography and the Novel. This essay is taken from his book called Languages of Truth, which is a collection of essays written between 2003 and 2020. And it contains some of the beautiful essays written by Rushdie during this period. And it talks about all kinds of literature in this book. But coming back to the question of autobiography and the novel, I thought that's really interesting one because you would have also heard it. A lot of people, a lot of readers, they ask this question to authors that how autobiographical it is and does it come from author's own life or not. And I think it was best answered by Rushdie in this essay, and he talks about all the details in it that are there in this question and how we can unpack it and how we can make sense of it and how we can answer it. So I thought instead of me answering this question based on this essay, I would read certain passages from the book, and that'll help you understand what Rushdie is really trying to say here. So let me now read out a few passages from the book, rather from the essay. Here we go. How autobiographical is it? The novel may be about a man lusting sexually after an underage girl, or it may be about a man who wakes up one day to find himself transformed into a giant dung beetle, or it may be about an American who has, in his own words, gone spastic in time and bounces uncontrollably between different ages. Or it may be about a man trying to get out of the army by claiming to be insane only to be told that there's a catch, namely that a man who wants to get out of the army cannot be insane. But the question is always the same, and so are the underlying assumptions. If Nabokov wrote Lolita, then he must have been at the very least exploring his own submerged pedophilic lusts. If Kafka wrote The Metamorphoses, then he must have seen himself as a disgusting rejected insect. And Billy Pilgrim, the hero of Slaughterhouse-Five, must be Kurt Vonnegut in disguise. And Catch-22's Yossarian must be Joseph Heller, and so on and so on. The imagination in our unimaginative times is no more than a costume that the facts put on. If you write about a serial killer like Hannibal Lecter, then perhaps you, Mr. Harris, have secret murderous fantasies. If your hero is a dwarf like Oscar Metzerat in The Tin Drum, then Gunter Grass must think of himself as dwarfish. And if you often write about bears, as John Irving did earlier in his career, then there must there not have been a beer that was important in your life. How autobiographical is it? As it happens, there is a right and a wrong answer to this question. The wrong answer first. It's not really autobiographical. I suppose there are bits of me in there, bits of things that really happened, but they've all been changed around and jumbled up with other things that I just made up, and there are bits of people I know, but they're all mixed up with other bits I invented. It's fiction. This answer has the merit of usually being true, but it is still the wrong answer. The right answer is it's completely autobiographical. Yes, everything in this novel happened either to me or to close friends or family members. Only this answer will satisfy and even impress the person asking this question. Only this answer will allow you to move past the autobiography question and then to the other, arguably more interesting questions about the work itself. This became clear to me when I published my novel Fury, whose central character was sexually abused as a child, who finds himself from time to time in the grip of inexplicable rages whose source he does not understand, who, in the grip of one such bout of fury in London, almost murders his sleeping wife and small child with a kitchen knife, and who later in New York City experiences nocturnal memory blackouts that coincide oddly with the killings perpetrated by a serial murderer. And every journalist who interviewed me said, "So, is it not your most autobiographical novel?" For a long time, I kept giving the wrong answer. No, not really. Until I worked out that if I said yes, of course, the journalist and I could both have a sigh of relief and begin to have a proper conversation. Nor is this autobiographical obsession limited to journalists. Readers have it too, and anyone who writes even a moderately successful novel will experience the phenomenon of people wanting to be characters in your books. People assuming they actually are characters in your books, even if you have never met them. After a lecture I gave in Bombay in the early 1980s, a woman, a rather grand, bejeweled woman, a woman carrying a fan, came up to me, closed her fan, and smacked me with it on my arm. "Whack, naughty boy," she said. "Never mind, I forgive you." I was thinking, "Madam, who the hell are you?" Then she identified herself as the obvious model for a particular character in my work. "Madam," I protested, "you have to accept that this is the first time we have ever met." She clucked her tongue impatiently. "I don't see why you're still going on about it," she said. "I've already forgiven you." The problem with this kind of foolishness is that it obscures in many ways in which a writer's life does inform his work. It is true that many fictional characters have real life models. But if a real person, which includes the writer himself, is a writer's starting point and a fictional character is the result, the journey from one to the other, we may say, is the imaginative act. It is in that transformative journey that the art lies. This is most particularly true of those instances in which a writer chooses a me character to place at the heart of his work. It is plain that Stephen Dedalus is close to James Joyce and that Marcel in Search of Lost Time shares a good deal with his creator Marcel Proust. And yet Stephen and Marcel are not flesh and blood creatures. They are made of words. And a life lived in language is quite other than a life spent breathing air. Stephen is not Joyce, though he went to the same school and shares his author's modest desire to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. And Marcel is not Proust. For one thing, he is heterosexual, and for another, he seems a good deal less frightened of the world and gets about a great deal more than his author in his famous cork-lined room. Every literary version of the real, a real place, a real family, a real man or woman, is just that, a version, and it is dangerous to equate it with that slipperiest of ideas, truth. There are good reasons why writers so often choose characters who are avatars, incarnations of themselves. It is helpful to be able to speak, think, and act through a shadow, an alternative I. to go down a road not taken, to make a variation on the theme of yourself. I've done it twice. Salim Sinai in Midnight's Children and Malik Solanka in Fury share a fair amount with their author. Salim and Salman not so far apart. In addition, Salim lives in my house, although I renamed it, wanders through my neighborhood, goes to my school, and his boyhood friends are made up of bits of mine. It's also true that Salim's family has a similar structure to my maternal family. I too had a grandfather who was a doctor, an aunt who married a Pakistani general, an uncle involved in the Bombay movie industry, and a Goan ayah or a nanny. I had thought that if I gave the novel a skeleton that I knew very well, it would be easier to control its immense length and scale. But during the writing of the novel, I made an interesting discovery. When I tried simply to portray these people as they actually were, that is, when I allowed my autobiography too much power, they obstinately refused to come to life and remained inertly non-fictive. It was only when I pushed them away from their models, when Salim's grandparents met through a hole in a perforated bedsheet, when Salim's uncle invented, to combat the censors, the innovative technique known as the indirect kiss, when Salim's uncle, the general, took part in a military coup, and above all, when Salim's Goan ayah, Mary, swapped two newborn babies in a nursing home as a political gesture and later rose to become an eminent pickle factory boss, that I had a novel to write. It was the imaginative leap and not the true life source material that mattered, to use the famous distinction of Levi-Strauss, not the raw but the cooked. And this finally is what I am defending: cookery, the joy of cooking. I want to talk a little about the ways in which an author's life does affect his work indirectly, by shaping his sensibility, by pointing him in one direction or another, and I guess I'll continue to focus on the author whose life I am most closely acquainted with. I was born and raised in a big city and have spent most of my life in big cities, and so it will come as no surprise that I see myself as essentially an urban writer. Also, to begin with, a post-colonial one. An empire does not end on the day the imperialists leave. And as I grew up, there was still a strong after-influence of the British. In many ways, the law, the school curriculum, the railways, the civil service, the land reclamations, the British were still with us. On the other hand, we were raised to be proud of the new independent India, whose children we were. My parents used to joke that I was born and 8 weeks later the British ran away. And really, how funny is that a joke? But I grew up in a city built by the British on Indian soil, itself a mixture of East and West, and that mingling forever shaped the way I saw the world. I was also the product of a division, the partition of the Indian subcontinent into the new states of India and Pakistan, and was raised in the aftermath of the massacres that followed, unable to forget the stories of the trains of slaughtered men, women, children arriving at railway stations in Amritsar and Lahore. The partition divided my family down the middle. Both my aunts were on the Pakistani side of the border, while we, more Indian than Muslim, preferred to stay on the Indian side. This gave me an accidental privilege as a writer. I could see the partition and the massacres and the history of the subcontinent from both sides. I took pride in the fact that Pakistani readers used Midnight's Children to enter India, and Indian readers used Shame to enter Pakistan. And I have always felt a close affinity for those writers, like the great Urdu short story writer Saadat Hasan Manto, who had one foot in Karachi and the other in Bombay. So these were a few passages from the essay, and there are a couple of interesting points that he makes. First, it's really convenient for a writer to have that broad structure based on his or her own life. So once you have those settings or some kind of a central character whom you really understand well, you have that in your mind. That is there based on your experiences, your memories, and to take that to a novel form, to create a story out of it, to create a novel, that itself is a creative process. And that's where the real thing lies. That's the real journey of an artist. That's what he says, that it's not as simple as simply replicating those real people into characters. No, it's a journey, it's a really creative journey. And you have to first have that raw material, people you have identified, certain characteristics, traits you have identified. You have an image of that person, that character, and then you let that image grow on its own. You let the character have its freedom to express themselves. And that's where the story grows, the plot grows, and of course, the character themselves, their personalities, they really shine. And that's the creative expression you need to have. And that's the freedom you need to give to your characters. So that's one thing. The second thing that he says is how our own experiences, they shape the stories we write. So they don't just give us a template, what we are going to write or how we are going to write or what our opinions are going to be. But he says inevitably we are a product of the society we come from, the social background, the cultural background, the beliefs, and the historical background where we are coming from. It is inevitably going to affect our points of views, and it'll eventually shape our writing style, as well as the story is shaped, the plot is shaped in a novel or any other book. So these were two important things, and I thought, like in his usual style, Rushdie brilliantly sums it up. And that's quite an interesting way to answer the question, that is novel autobiographical? And the short answer is a little bit. But the long answer is, it's just the raw ingredients that come from the real world, from writers' own experiences, and everything other than that. In fact, the whole process, it's like cooking. You take the raw materials and you let them cook, you let them grow, and then you serve it to the reader. So that's quite an interesting way of putting it, and I thought it's worth sharing with you all. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll get a chance to read more of Rushdie's essays. So thank you once again. I'll catch you the next time with another book. Thank you.